Think O'Reilly Auto Parts. For all your car care needs, you can get guaranteed low prices and excellent customer service at O'Reilly Auto Parts. O'Reilly Auto Parts, better prices every day. So Phil Jackson finally has spoken about his disastrous tenure as the Knicks president of basketball operations. Phil Jackson has basically avoided talking about the Knicks in any interview he's done since James Dolan fired him shortly after the 2016 NBA draft. So Phil Jackson was on a podcast, the Curious Leader podcast. It's hosted by former Lakers player Kobe Carl. And Phil Jackson basically took zero blame, showed zero accountability for being one of the worst executives in the history of sports. Phil Jackson was so bad that the Knicks fired him when he had $24 million remaining on his contract. They paid him $24 million to go away. Phil Jackson, by the way, his last parting gift was drafting Frank Ntilikina over Donovan Mitchell. Just throwing that one out there. Knicks fans don't forget, believe me. But Phil Jackson in this article here, he basically, talks about how, he didn't have the right coaches in place. Who hired the coaches? You, Phil. I mean, in this story I'm reading here, the excerpt from the Daily News, Phil Jackson talks about how, in hindsight, maybe I should have just coached the team myself, but I couldn't because of my health. Well, yeah, that's a big problem. You tried to coach the team through Kurt Rambis, through Derek Fisher, through Jeff Hornacek, and it was a disaster. I mean, he hired Derek Fisher, then Derek Fisher immediately gets into trouble for sleeping with Matt Barnes' ex. I mean, Phil Jackson in this story, he doesn't take any accountability for signing Joakim Noah to a $72 million contract. He doesn't even talk about the fact that he's the one who gave Carmelo Anthony a max extension. He's blaming Melo, talking about Melo not being a great leader. He's the one who signed him. He didn't have to sign him. And he's blaming Knicks fans for being too tough on him and the team when Knicks fans gave him a standing ovation the day he got the job and they showed him on the Jumbotron at Madison Square Garden. Knicks fans were on board when you were hired. They didn't want to turn against you. You were just such a disaster at your job that the fan base turned on you. I mean, every Knicks fan, myself included, we were so excited when Phil took the job. I mean, all we knew about Phil Jackson was he was a former Knicks, sixth man on the team that won a championship with Walt Clyde Frazier and Willis Reed. We knew him as this great coach with the Bulls and the Lakers, and we were excited. And then the reports came out that, Phil Jackson was falling asleep at draft workouts. Phil Jackson, tried to trade Kristaps Porzingis after he's the one who drafted him. He forced coaches to run the triangle, which only works when you have Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant. Once again, he hired Derek Fisher and Jeff Hornacek, who were a disaster. One of his first major moves, as Stephen A. Smith would say, was to sign Lamar Odom, who was on crack. That's what Stephen A. said. He's right. Also, Phil Jackson made a terrible trade for Jose Calderon just so he could run the triangle offense. He traded away Tyson Chandler in that deal. Every move that Phil Jackson made was garbage. I mean, he blames Melo in this story I'm reading here from the Daily News saying, Melo wanted to lead, but he really didn't know how. I mean, Melo was the only one who was a good player. You never surrounded him with anyone. Such a mess. He's the one that signed Derrick Rose or traded for Derrick Rose the first time around. He's the one that signed Joakim Noah. He's the one that traded for Calderon. He's the one that hired Fisher, Rambis, and Jeff Hornacek. I mean, and here's the kicker. This quote I'm about to read you here from Phil. Phil Jackson said that he understands what President Donald Trump was going through with the media the last 3.5 years. Quote, I kind of understand what Trump had to live with, probably for his first 3.5 years in office with the media. Blaming the media is so weak. The media wanted you to do well. Every Knicks fan wanted you to do well. No one wants to cover a team that's garbage, but you gave them nothing to cover but garbage. I mean, every move this guy made was terrible. His draft picks were bad. The only good thing Phil Jackson did as a Knicks executive is that he didn't trade away all their draft picks. That's it. You want to give Phil a medal for that? He didn't trade away all their future ones like other Knicks GMs have done in the past. Great. But firing Phil Jackson was one of the best moves the Knicks franchise has made in the last 10 years. There haven't been a lot of them. That was one of them. That's how bad Phil was. I get it. I get that, but like you guys would always beat the Knicks. So what have the Knicks done to you? Like the Knicks were just basically playing second fiddle to Jordan every year in the 90s. By the way, yeah, I'm just reading this story from the Daily News. And by the way, the Knicks have not won a title since 1973. Thank you for bringing that up. Phil Jackson talks about how he wanted to trade Carmelo, but like he couldn't trade Carmelo because he had a no trade clause. Guess who gave him the no trade clause? That would be Phil Jackson. So I read these comments and it's just like, are you kidding? I mean, oh my God. He gave Melo a no trade clause. Blame Melo. I mean, every move this guy made was such a disaster. So bad. His drafting was terrible. I mean, the one pick he hit on was Porzingis, and he wanted to deal Porzingis because he skipped an exit meeting. Porzingis probably had the right idea. You know, just the way he just piled on Melo, who just took everything in stride and never badmouthed him publicly. What a joke. Phil Jackson, get lost. Get lost, Phil. Go back to your Montana ranch and let's not hear from you ever again.